Good afternoon and welcome to the Today Show. I'm your host, Savannah Guthrie. Unfortunately, Matt Lauer couldn't be here today, and I'm homesick, so we're going to do this a little bit differently and film over the computer on my handy dandy desk here, and we're going to get you guys all set to go. So, recently, we have received some criticism that our reports of new cutting-edge scientific discoveries aren't too scientific. Take a look. We know that you, our viewers, love a good scientific discovery just as much as we do, so fear not. We don't intend to stop now. But given the criticism, we thought we could make a compromise with a scientific book critique. We promise this will be the only one, and we won't bore you to death while you enjoy your morning news. And fear not. There will be more discoveries about how pizza is the most addictive food and similar studies because we know that you, our audience, loves them. So, without further ado, let's do this thing. We're going to be critiquing the scientific claims of William Golding's book, The Inheritors, which was published in 1955. One thing I find particularly interesting about this book is how the ideals and values of the Neanderthals and modern humans reflect similar values of the age that it was written in. This theme has been fairly common over time as scientists have learned about Neanderthals throughout the course of history. Here are a few physical depictions that aren't quite spot on. The one you're seeing now is a depiction by researchers at the University of Zurich, who reconstructed this Neanderthal child based on the Gilbertor II skull. However, given its human-like characteristics, it's unlikely that they really looked like that. In my opinion, I think it better reflects the look of Canadian actor Michael Cera. But these false depictions that reflect our own human understandings have been going on for ages. Carlton S. Kuhn, an American anthropologist in the mid-1900s, once even stated that if you dressed a Neanderthal up, gave him a shave and a bath, and sent him into society, he would attract no more attention than some of the subway's other denizens. He even reconstructed this idea of what a Neanderthal looks like in his theory. In contrast, Golding never once used the term Neanderthal in his novel. However, at the very end, he does give a nice description of what Locke and the rest of the group might have looked like. But he does explicitly describe the looks of the new people, or what we would consider modern humans, and that's what we're going to focus on right now. They were described as a reflection of the humans he lived around in the United Kingdom in the 1950s. There's been some speculation from his daughter and also in some censuses, and he even said himself that these reflections are given his own understanding and reflect the way he grew up. So when explaining how Locke sees the new people, he gives intimate details on how the new people's looks differ from Locke's. Locke saw them as so pale that he thought at first glance their faces were just bone with no skin. This is more likely a reflection of the humans Golding had encountered when he lived in the UK, rather than what they actually looked like. We can see this in a 1951 census of the UK, which found that 87% of the population was white at the time. So it makes sense that he was characterizing the new people as white as well, especially since the book takes place in his hometown, or in what would be his hometown. New Age analysis tells us that modern humans would have actually had darker skin tones at the time, given that they had just recently migrated from tropical Africa. In the scholarly article, The Anthropology of Skin Colors, an examination of the evolution of skin pigmentation and the concepts of race and skin color, Nina Jablonski of the Department of Anthropology at Penn State University found that, and I quote, modern human beings began living outside of the tropics more than 60,000 years ago. Among the many challenges facing these humans in new environments was that they had to make sufficient vitamin D in their skin to satisfy their physiological and reproductive needs, end quote. Vitamin D is crucial in absorption of calcium, which in turn produces and maintains healthy bones, and it is essential in keeping a healthy immune system and cardiovascular system. Thus, pale pigmentation was eventually procured as a result of genetic mutation and strong natural selection. But this happens over time. So it's less likely that the new people described in the Inheritors had just arrived to Europe. There's some speculation, however, that it's more likely that Locke and the rest of his group were the ones who had genetically mutated to have pale skin because the Neanderthals had already been living in Europe for 100,000 years at this point. Moreover, in the Inheritors, a central theme was solving hunger. The Neanderthals were always hungry, sometimes starving to the point of not being able to think. There are some hypotheses that suggest that this was a reflection of Golding's life living and being a part of Europe during World War II. However, in the novel, the Neanderthals are scavengers. They even feel guilt when they scavenge a deer that has been killed by a large cat. In Neanderthal Subsistence Behaviors in Europe, a journal by Meryl Ney-Patel-Mathis, Mathis says that in her research, they found that Neanderthals did in fact scavenge for food. She said during the whole Middle Paleolithic, the Neanderthals collected pieces from fresh, complete carcasses that predators and scavengers had not damaged, which gave them quick access to animals, probably naturally dead, as well as from carcasses ravaged by other carnivores, which gave them late access, low meat value elements, especially in the case of big species such as proboscideans and rhinoceros. But she also describes them as expert hunters who actively participated in obtaining large species. She goes on to say that they set their camps in favorable spots where they could select their prey, maximally exploiting them and probably practicing time-limited storage. Yet Mathis explains that there is little direct evidence of cooking remains, but there is some indirect evidence that, quote, testifies to the utilization of fire to cook meat or even to smoke it, for example. In the Inheritors, fire is of extreme importance to the Neanderthals. They even use it for warmth. They help Mal lay by it when he is sick from crossing the river, and when Locke, Fa, and Laiku come back with a deer they had taken from the large cats, the old woman cooks some of it in the fire. The old woman is even referenced in the book for having a sleeping fire that was in a clay ball. Each of these activities and more displays that Golding hypothesized that the groups had theory of mind. Now, theory of mind is the ability to recognize presence of your mental states, beliefs, feelings, motivations, knowledge, and that others might differ from yours. On the Origin of Autonomy, a new look at the major transition in evolution, Bernd Rosenbroich describes fire in relation to theory of mind in Neanderthals. He explains that in making fire, a Neanderthal might have had a few components that prove their theory of mind. His list included the insight that fire consumes the fuel, the conclusion that new fuel needs to be added to the fire to keep it burning, the awareness that the fire goes out, and when it does, I will be cold or predators will come near, the insight that this creates a future need, which requires me to act now, and the conclusion that I might start gathering food now. Once the fire's gone out, it's too late. All of these thoughts give a good general basis that they might have imagined themselves freezing if the fire dies, much like is described in the Inheritors. Moreover, it sheds light onto what Neanderthals were thinking about and their possible brain capacity. In the Inheritors, the Neanderthals could communicate with one another. They didn't have a large vocabulary, but they did speak to one another frequently, often through pictures which they saw as past memories and present assumptions. The pictures in many ways were their language that they tried to explain to one another through pictures that influenced the way that they thought. We can see this in Fa. I just messed that up. All of these thoughts give a good general basis that they might have imagined themselves freezing if the fire dies, much like it's described in the Inheritors. Moreover, it sheds light onto what Neanderthals were thinking and their possible brain capacity. In the Inheritors, the Neanderthals could communicate with one another. They didn't have a large vocabulary, but they did speak to one another frequently, often through pictures which they saw as past memories and present assumptions. The pictures in many ways were their language that they tried to explain to the others, and the pictures influenced the way that they thought. Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf are famous for their Sapir-Whorf hypothesis that states that language can affect the thoughts and behaviors of the culture in which it is spoken. Whereas in strong language, language determines thought, and in weak language, language influences thought. Here we see weak language in pictures when Fa says she's seeing a picture, and the rest of the group begins to comprehend her picture as well. We can also see linguistic relativism in things such as gendering of languages, the color spectrum, directional use, or even counting. And we can see that in everyday life in many other cultures. But without fossil evidence of if they could speak or how they communicated, it's uncertain. Rosenbrosch says, quote, "It is probable that early hominids had at least some form of highly flexible use of signals that played an essential role in social interaction. At what point communication grew beyond the use of signals to become a symbolic language, however, will be hard to determine." In conclusion, this book had some assumptions that held up with scientific fact, like theory of mind and the use of fire. However, many assumptions didn't hold as well, such as skin pigmentation of the new people, language use, and only being scavengers. This book was very Oh, yes? What's that? This just in! Oh my gosh, wow. There has been a new study by Hershey and with who? The Vineyard Foundation of America. They found that eating chocolate and drinking wine every day can make you immortal. Wow, what a scientific find. That is amazing. That is all the time we have for today. We'll see you next week with some more scientific studies and such. Thanks for tuning in.